And this is what this election, I think, is really about.
You may think you are the best prepared, but would you acknowledge that Senator Obama and Senator Edwards are both prepared to be president?
Well, I think that that's up to the voters to decide. I think that's something that voters have to make a decision about on all of us. They have to look at each and every one of us and imagine us in the Oval Office, imagine us as Commander-in-Chief, imagine us making tough decisions about everything we know we're going to have to deal with, and then all of the unpredictable events that come through the door of the White House and land on the desk of the President.
Senator Obama, you gave an interview to the Reno Gazette-Journal, and you said we all have strengths and weaknesses. You said one of your weaknesses is, quote, "I'm not an operating officer." Do the American people want someone in the Oval Office who is an operating officer?
Well, I think what I was describing was how I view the presidency. Now, being president is not making sure that schedules are being run properly or the paperwork is being shuffled effectively. It involves having a vision for where the country needs to go. It involves having the capacity to bring together the best people and being able to spark the kind of debate about how we're going to solve healthcare, how we're going to solve energy, how we are going to deliver good jobs and good wages, how we're going to keep people in their homes here in Nevada, and then being able to mobilize and inspire the American people to get behind that agenda for change. That's the kind of leadership that I've shown in the past. That's the kind of leadership that I intend to show as President of the United States. So what's needed is sound judgment, a vision for the future, the capacity to tap into the hopes and dreams of the American people and mobilize them to push aside those special interests and lobbyists and forces that are standing in the way of real change, and making sure that you have a government that reflects the decency and the generosity of the American people. That's the kind of leadership that I believe I can provide.
You said each of you have strengths and weaknesses. I want to ask each of you quickly. Your greatest strength, your greatest weakness.
My greatest strength, I think, is the ability to bring people together from different perspectives, to get them to recognize what they have in common and to move people in a different direction. And as I indicated before, my greatest weakness, I think, is that when it comes to, I'll give you a very good example. I ask my staff never to hand me paper until 2 seconds before I need it, because I will lose it. And my desk in my office doesn't look good. I've got to have somebody around me who is keeping track of that stuff. And that's not trivial. I need to have good people in place who can make sure that systems run. That's what I've always done, and that's why we've run not only a good campaign, but a good U.S. Senate office.
Senator Edwards, greatest strength, greatest weakness.
I think my greatest strength is that for 54 years I've been fighting with every fiber of my being. In the beginning, the fight was for me. Growing up in mill towns and mill villages, I had to literally fight to survive. But then I spent 20 years in courtrooms fighting for children and families against really powerful, well-financed interests. I learned from that experience, by the way, that if you're tough enough and you're strong enough and you got the guts and you're smart enough, you can win. That's a fight that can be won. It can be won in Washington, too, by the way. And I've continued that fight my entire time in public life. So I've got what it takes inside to fight on behalf of the American people and on behalf of the middle class. I think weakness, I sometimes have a very powerful emotional response to pain that I see around me. When I see a man like Donnie Ingram, who I met a few months ago in South Carolina, who worked for 33 years in the mill, reminded me very much of the kind of people that I grew up with, who's about to lose his job, has no idea where he's going to go, what he's going to do. I mean, his dignity and self-respect is at issue. And I feel that in a really personal way and in a very emotional way. And I think sometimes that can undermine what you need to do.
Senator Clinton.
Well, I am passionately committed to this country and what it stands for. I'm a product of the changes that have already occurred, and I want to be an instrument for making those changes alive and real in the lives of Americans, particularly children. That's what I've done for 35 years. It is really my life's work. It is something that comes out of my own experience, both in my family and in my church, that, I've been blessed. And I think to whom much is given, much is expected. So I have tried to create opportunities, both on an individual basis, intervening to help people who have nowhere else to turn, to be their champion, and then to make those changes. And I think I can deliver change. I think I understand how to make it possible for more people to live up to their God-given potential. I get impatient. I get really frustrated when people don't seem to understand that we can do so much more to help each other. And sometimes I come across that way. I admit that. I get very concerned about pushing further and faster than perhaps people are ready to go. But I think that there is a difference here. I do think that being president is the chief executive officer. And I respect what Barack said about setting the vision, setting the tone, bringing people together. But I think you have to be able to manage and run the bureaucracy. You've got to pick good people, certainly, but you have to hold them accountable every single day. We've seen the results of a president who, frankly, failed at that. He went into office saying he was going to have the kind of Harvard Business School CEO model where he'd set the tone, he'd set the goals, and then everybody else would have to implement it. And we saw the failures. We saw the failures along the Gulf Coast with, people who were totally incompetent and insensitive, failing to help our fellow Americans. We've seen the failures with holding the administration accountable with the no-bid contracts and the cronyism. So I do think you have to do both. It's a really hard job, and in America we put, the head of state and the head of government together in one person. But I think you've got to set the tone, you've got to set the vision, you've got to set the goals, you've got to bring the country together, and then you do have to manage and operate and hold that bureaucracy accountable to get the results you're trying to achieve.
Senator Obama, Senator Clinton invoked your name. I'll give you a chance to respond.
Well, there's no doubt that you've got to be a good manager, and that's not what I was arguing. The point in terms of bringing together a team is that you get the best people and you're able to execute and hold them accountable. But I think that there's something, if we're going to evaluate George Bush and his failures as president, that I think are much more important. He was very efficient. He was on time all the time, and I'm sure he never lost a paper. I'm sure he knows where it is. What he could not do is to listen to perspectives that didn't agree with his ideological predispositions. What he could not do is to bring in different people with different perspectives and get them to work together. What he could not do is to manage the effort to make sure that the American people understood that if we're going to go into war, that there are going to be consequences and there are going to be costs, and we have to be able to communicate what those costs are and to make absolutely certain that if we're going to make a decision to send our young men and women into harm's way, that it's based on the best intelligence and that we've asked tough questions before we went into fight. I mean, those are the kinds of failures that have to do with judgment, they have to do with vision, the capacity to inspire people. They don't have to do with whether or not he was managing the bureaucracy properly. That's not to deny that there has to be strong management skills in the presidency. It is to say that what has been missing is the ability to bring people together, to mobilize the country, to move us in a better direction, and to be straight with the American people. That's how you get the American people involved.
Time for the rebuttal has expired.
The job which we should have done, which should have been our primary focus, to find, bin Laden.
Mr. bin Laden used to live in Sudan. He was expelled from Saudi Arabia in 91, and he went to Sudan. And we did it. They released him. At the time, 96, he had committed no crime against America, so I did not bring him here because we had no basis on which to hold him. Though we knew he wanted to commit crimes against America. I did not bring him here, though we knew he wanted to commit crimes against America.
Secretary of State Madeleine Albright said, well, if we bomb Afghanistan now, it's not a good time to bomb Muslims. It'll essentially blow up the Middle East peace process and doom any chances President Clinton has of winning the Nobel Prize for Peace.
I was delighted when Jimmy Carter won the Nobel Peace Prize because I thought he earned it, and I thought it was great because he got it as much for what he did after office as when he was in office.
Bill Clinton is still campaigning for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I remember exactly what happened. Bruce Lindsay said to me on the phone, "We'll guide a second plane is at the top." And I said, Bin Laden did this. That's the first thing I said. He said, how can you be sure? I said, because only Bin Laden and the Iranians could set up a network to do this, and they wouldn't do it because they have a country and targets. Bin Laden did it.
Did you also think at the same time we came pretty close to getting them?
Yeah, I thought that my virtual accessorism was well placed, and I was full of regret that I didn't get him. I mean, I immediately thought that he had done it. I always ask the same question for 8 years. Can we kill him tomorrow?
Bin Laden is alive today because Mr. Clinton, Mr. Sandy Berger, and Mr. Richard Clark refused to kill him. That's the bottom line.
Hillary's commander-in-chief problem. It isn't that they can't see the solution. It is that they can't see the problem.